Damage that you deal is not dependent on range. That's the biggest misinformation I've seen. The range at which you are with this character increases the AoE. Whenever I'm very close, the AoE explosion of my basic attack is not going to be very large, damaging players around Luna Snow. However, if I'm farther from Luna Snow, the explosion radius of my basic attack is going to increase. Here's a better example. If I'm right here and I shoot my basic attack, the explosion radius is not going to hit both of these people. However, if I'm this far, the explosion radius is going to hit both of them now. In case you couldn't tell, his basic attack is something to be spammed into the enemy team at the sweet spot of about 20 to 25 meters. Magneto's whole kit is dependent on you being 20 to 25 meters away from the enemy players. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of hours as Magneto, so I can't really give concrete advice on how to play him. What I can say, though, is his right click is for keeping players far away from you. Every ability Magneto has is just as important as the other. You have his self shield, which prevents any damage being dealt to you for a few seconds. You also have a shield you can give others. It's important to note that his self shield and the shield you can give others both work on the same cooldown. So if you use one of those abilities, both abilities technically go down. And then you have his large shield. This shield only has a 3-second cooldown. However, before you have its full use, it also has a secondary cooldown, which you can see here. Once at full charge, that's how long you can use that shield for, blocking any amount of damage. If I weren't going to wait for the full cooldown, I could use it for a split second. It can be used in a lot of clutch plays. And lastly, you have his ult. Just like his basic attack, it does have splash damage. However, that is not where Magneto gets most of his value from. There are two things that make Magneto's ult valuable. One is the fact that it can get a limbs easy. The other one is the fact that it absorbs any incoming projectiles. Pay attention to these red bullets that these robots are shooting. When I use the ult, they can no longer shoot. They get absorbed into my ult. Something else to note about his ult is the more I absorb, the more the gauge in the middle of the screen increases. The higher that gauge, the more my ult is going to do damage-wise. At first glance, there's not a lot going on with Magneto, but the more you play the character, the more you realize how in-depth he is. Something I forgot to mention is that his right click does not always launch enemies away. It is dependent on how many of these arrows you have in the middle of the screen. At 3 arrows, you are going to knock someone back and deal max damage with that ability. At 2 arrows, you are not going to knock them back, but you are going to deal the most amount of damage. At 1 arrow, you are dealing minimum damage with no knockback. You can recharge these arrows faster by using your shield and converting that damage dealt into